Welcome back to the channel. On this video, let's review a map to build a project management plan. Let's get right into it. Hello again, Sylvain Gauthier, your executive producer. And on this video, like I said, we're going to be focusing on building a project management plan. And for that, I developed a map that I use to share with the students and with also people working with me on the project in terms of how we're going to construct that plan. But first, let's get into the definition of what is a project, which is the application of knowledge, skill, tools, and techniques to project activities to meet project requirements. So there's a notion of we target requirements. We try to meet that, and therefore we will identify our scope, our work package, but also the activity to produce these work package. And for that, we will need some resource attached to these activities. So a project's got a start and it's got an end. It's not a job creation thing, right? So when we invest in a project, we expect to get the return by a certain time. So the end is important, and that's why my key message on this video today is we need to start with the end in mind. Meaning we don't focus just on getting the project going. We start by thinking, how do we gonna finish this thing? How do we gonna be at the end of it? And therefore we're gonna start from there and then build everything we need to make sure we get to this end. Okay? Starting with the end in mind, it's the best way to finish a project. If you don't know how you're going to end up, if you just start, building your scope and doing your schedule and doing all your activities and things like that, without the end in mind, you're never going to finish. Why? Because there's always going to be something coming at you that will be pushing, and we're not sure if it's over, it's finished or not. So start with the end in mind. Of course, we'll be talking, when we talk a project, about product, service, and portfolio and process as part of what we're going to be delivering as part of the project. So let's get into the map, start with the end in mind. So before we start building the project management plan, typically you will have another document that's been generated, the project charter. Actually, there's a video about how to build a project charter. But let's just recap what it is. As usually a project will start with a problem or an opportunity that's a user or someone has in the organization, or it might be in the case of a contract from a customer. It could be a customer that got that problem or that opportunity. Therefore, they want to use your service to build the project. Or it could be somebody internally that's got a problem and an opportunity, and you will be developing a solution. And developing a solution means also we're looking for certain business objective. We're looking for certain return out of this investment we're putting in this solution. That's an important piece here, okay? An investment in a project always are looking for return. And of course, returns might be different form. It might be beneficial in a sense of financial, but it could be also non-financial with other type of success factors, such as quality, satisfaction of customer, brand image, etc. Okay, so the point is there will be justification, the business case, our business plan, that'll be there to justify, yes, it is worth it for our own organization to invest in this solution to address this problem or this opportunity, and this is the results we want to have. That's what a charter is to document the reason we're investing in this project. What are we trying to get? What are the constraints we're dealing with? Because if the justification might be good, if you can get the result within a certain time, but if it takes too much time, it doesn't make sense anymore. So you will have a constraint on time. You will have also a constraint on cost, because it makes sense if we don't spend more than this. If we have to spend more, it doesn't make sense anymore. So therefore, there's a constraint on cost. There might be a lot of risk also involved with this one, maybe business risk if we don't do it, if we do it. So that's what we want to put in a charter. Again, there's a video for that, and you could refer to that if you're looking to build a charter. But to me, this is the reason we invest. This is what we're trying to get with this project, and it is signed by someone in authority in the organization or a committee in order to approve the allocation of resource on a project. He's got the authority for that, right? Which is different than sometimes what people do, which is launching project because they have money in their budget and they're, for example, a director of a function and say, oh, I still have money, so let's do this project. Not really. You don't have the authority for allocating resource on the project. You have authority to allocate a resource on your function. If you are a director of IT, yeah, you could allocate money to do support to your service, you upgrade whatever you are doing on ongoing operation. Yes, you do. But having authority on investing in a project should be higher up in the organization with a management committee, typically depending on the governance, or maybe a higher sponsor that do have this authority. The point is, we need to go and get the authority, and the charter is raised, and that's the trigger to launch, and go ahead and start planning the project. Now, if we go down in the map here, we got the charter, and you start to see acceptance on the map. And then one's like, but acceptance comes at the end. Yeah, but I told you we start with the end in mind. So if I want to finish a project, I need to get acceptance. And I want you to start with that. I need to get acceptance. And then the question becomes, from who? Okay. Well, from the stakeholders, the people that got vested interest in this project. Either they are working on it, they are receiving it, they are impacted by it, or they will benefit of it. So the point is, you got a whole bunch of stakeholders. Let's find them. Okay, before we even get started working on anything else, let's find who could be the stakeholder of this solution we're trying to bring in, and therefore what will be their needs. Okay, and now when we sit down with them and say, okay, we're coming up with this solution, what could be your needs versus that? Well, how can that affect you in any way, shape, or form? Okay, what kind of function do you have with this solution? And therefore, they will tell you, oh, we're going to be using it, or we're going to be having to support it. We're going to have to having to train people about it. So they will communicate what their needs are. And then you're going to go beyond and say, okay, so how do we know what would be good for you? Okay, what would be acceptable for you? Because I'm looking at acceptance. So I'll say, well, let's say we're coming with an application. They might say, well, it's got to be easy to use, okay, for my staff. Okay, so I've got the easy to use in terms of needs, but there's not really a way to measure easy of use. Okay, so I have to go beyond and say, okay, how would you measure if it's easy to use or not? Okay, and maybe the people will say, oh, well, if it takes a minute or two for my people to know how it works, so you don't have to call, IT, and they don't have to call any other people, or they don't need to have like a course of watching video, that's easy to use. Okay, so we know the requirements. Within a couple of minutes, people can use it. Okay, so all of these needs, we're going to translate that in requirements, and therefore we'll document all these requirements and needs and stakeholder in the statement of work. Okay, that's what the statement of work is to collect these requirements and have a place when we could say, okay, if we meet all of this with these stakeholders, we should get acceptance. We should be able to end this project. So we haven't touched yet work breakdown structure. We haven't touched scheduling. We haven't touched any of this. We're focusing on the top part here. That being said, once I've got that, okay, once I understand that, and let's be honest, right? It's tough for a certain stakeholder or a certain type of project, if you're working in technology, to have the stakeholder that knows exactly their needs and their requirements. So it might be complicated sometimes for them to tell you what is their requirements, okay? Because it might be a complex thing that will affect different systems, that will affect different database, and they don't know. So if it's very complex, then you might want to bring a business analyst to help with understanding the different process, and they are equipped with different tools to map process, look at the system, see how do they interact with each other, and now here's the solution coming in where it's going to be impacting the different systems, so you could capture the real requirements that you will need to address to make sure that the solution works for them and does not create a problem coming down the line. So this whole part is a very important part because this is what we need to shoot for. And is it going to change? Yeah, it will. It will. Okay, I guarantee you, as you're going to move in the project, chances are, stakeholders might realize that's not exactly the requirements I had in mind. Or now that we know better, we understand better, it's more like this that I need. So, yeah, this thing could evolve. Of course, while we are in planning, it could evolve and change. However, when we're going to be in execution, we will be freezing that. Any change to the statement of work will have to be submitted with a change request and the whole process, and evaluate the impact on the rest of the planning that we've done. So now we're starting. We got a requirement, so let's start building the plan, or continuing building the plan, I should say, by figuring out what do we need to produce versus these requirements. And that's what the deliverables will be, okay? And the technique we'll be using is a decomposition technique. You're going to create a work breakdown structure, and you will break it down to the lowest level of what you need to produce, okay? There's a difference in terms of what do I produce versus how do I produce it, okay? What is an output? How would be an activity? So you want to break it down to the minimum you could go in terms of what you need to produce without going into the how. I understand building a schedule, continue on the decomposition, and you're going to go get the activity the same way. But for me, the deliverable and the work package should be stopping at the what? The output. Should be all output. With that, we document what it means in what we call the scope dictionary, the WBS dictionary, if you want, that says what are these deliverables, because you might have a deliverable of saying a user guide. And as a stakeholder, I might say, okay, I like it. But in my mind, a user guide is like, a PDF the online that I could download. And the user guide might not be that. In the reality, it might be something more thicker than that in the book. And so, again, being able to describe what we mean by that could clarify expectation. We could understand this is, a training as a deliverable. In my mind, it's like something online, but in fact, it's a 2-day training in class. So we gotta make sure that we understand that. So that's what the dictionary is, and all of this becomes the scope and defines this is what we need to produce versus these requirements. And if I produce that with these requirements at a certain level of quality, I will be satisfying the need and I will get acceptance. Now I move on the other side, and you see a little dash line here that's separate, because the dash line separate the what needs to be delivered versus the constraint that I have to deal with, okay? A schedule is a constraint, right? So now what I need to identify is how I'm going to be delivering these output, and that's what the schedule is, okay? A series of activities that we need to identify. Activities takes time, you use resource, and we will map these activities, put the dependencies. We will, after that, being able to assign resource on it, then establish effort and duration on these activities. Based on the resource that we have, and then come up with a network that we could look at and find what's critical, what's not critical. And on top of it, we're going to slap a calendar for each of these activities to have the dates appearing. And now we have a schedule that we could work with, and therefore we are in a position now to start looking at the impact of these resources that we have allocated on these activities. Resource costs money. So if I have a painter, it's maybe $50 an hour. Maybe if I rent a truck, it's $1,000 per week, or $500 a day. So all of these resources that I have allocated, it's got a unit cost. Now I need to put it into the budget, which is going to give me a time phase budget, and the time phase budget will be the cumulative of all these resources used over the variable of duration in a certain case. Over the variable of effort if it's people, and that's how we're going to be having this time phase cumulative S-curve be built. So it's the development of the budget is a direct result of combining the unit cost of the resource versus the effort or the duration in certain times. Okay, for example, if I'm talking a painter, I will align to the effort because I don't want to align to the duration. I want to align to how much hours is going to take you to paint. Well, if I rent a truck, it's not going to be on effort. It will be rent per day, for example. So I want to know the duration. We're going to have 5 days. So this is why, you need to adjust versus the reality. But you need these 2 points, effort and duration. That being said, once we have that, it's a first pass. It's all the activity to produce the work. Now we need to think. I want to get acceptance. I have certain requirements to meet, so I need to validate and test and check and do certain things. So I need a quality control plan that will, ensure that I'm meeting these requirements. And what it is, a quality control plan is a plan that ensures compliance to the requirement. And it might be mean with testing and validation and checking and auditing and all kind of meat in order for us to establish it pass or fail. So the quality control plan will be using also sometimes very specific tools to be able to execute this testing or validation or certification in a certain case. So these tools and equipment are also resources that will be required. So that's an important piece. Now we need to identify all the activities to actually ensure that the quality control plan, but also the resource we need in order to do these activities. Again, resource on quality could be very costly in certain cases and could be very limited in terms of availability over time. If you need to go to a lab for earthquake validation, you might not go because your schedule is start and finish to start, and now you're ready to go. They might not. So they might say, only that date were available for you. So again, quality could derail the schedule. So that's why all activities related to your quality control need to be inserted in your schedule. Okay? Boom. As soon as you start answering that, whatever critical path you had is changed. And now you need to add in the pool of resource, all the resource for quality. Of course, it will affect your budget big time also. So, of course, quality control will be an important piece, but also quality assurance. And people will sometimes got a problem with the quality assurance. Quality assurance is really, getting confidence. And what do we mean by that, getting confidence? There's certain deliverables, okay? They're not going to be accepted based on passing a test or failing a test or not failing, of course, you're not going to get it, but passing a test at a certain percentage or passing an audit. It will not going to work like this. They might be accepting based on, I like it, I don't like it. Okay, if you're working in a creative environment, if you're presenting certain screen, maybe people will say, yeah, it does the job in terms of good, but I don't like it. I don't like the look. I don't like the way it's working. So no, I don't want that. I don't like the color. I don't like the music. I don't like the sound. So there is requirements that are subjective. And it's not a quality control to make sure that you get it done. It's going to be a quality assurance that you need to put into this. And therefore, you're going to have to figuring out ways of doing activities to engage your stakeholders, solicit feedback, getting their notes on what you're doing so you could improve and get closer to get the deliverable. So the quality assurance is also a plan that we need to build in the schedule, especially for subjective type of criteria for acceptance. After that, we got the communication we need to build in, information retrieval, information distribution, 2 plans, a lot of activities needs to be put in the schedule, and therefore assigning resource, and it will affect the budget. Risk, mitigation, contingency, or plan B, all of this require resource also and needs to be inserted in the schedule so you reflect also these activities and it reflects in your budget also the cost of doing risk management. Mitigation costs a lot of money. Okay, it's part of the game. You intentionally investing resource to prevent certain things to happen, or you investing resource to be ready to deal if a problem happen. Like for example, let's say you're doing an event outside. I'm gonna have a tent ready to go if in the morning it rains. Well, you're gonna need to do the activity to bring the tent and have the guys there waiting. So this also will affect your schedule. and will affect your resource. So risk is going to be a big part, and procurement is all the resource we don't have internally that we need to go and get externally, that needs to be brought into play, that we need to figuring out. And certain will be easy because it might be just to go on Amazon and buy something and it's pure purchase order. But others, in case of RFP and things like that, where you need to solicit solution and engage into the whole process of selection, contract negotiation, the whole thing, it could be a lot of activities and very lengthy activities in order to bring these resources on board. So you want to have that in your schedule too. So your schedule is the heart, is the what attach all the activities. Anything you do around the schedule at the quality, communication, risk, procurement has to be inserted in your schedule, and you need to allocate the resource to do that, and it will affect your budget, okay? Which is the whole integration part. For those of you that are studying the PMP and you're reading the integration, it was like, I'm not sure I'm getting it. Well, that's what it is. It's to connect everything into your schedule. Once you have it working together, you got all your constraints put in, you got your deliverables, you got your requirement, it seems to work, which seems to be okay versus the initial constraint that we had to deal with in terms of this solution, in terms of the justification. Okay, so we got a plan. We could freeze the plan. We could get sign off on the plan and move into execution. So that's an example of how you would actually build a project plan. That's a map. Now, on another video, I will explain the process of circular thinking versus linear thinking, so you understand that you don't necessarily do one section at the time. You don't necessarily do the WBS and then do the schedule. You might do a portion of the WBS, a portion of the schedule. You might do, so it might go like this and evolve as you're doing it. Okay, that's it for now. If you liked it, just put a thumbs up.